My name is Jack Schneiger, and I'm a student in philosophy at the University of Oregon and a 2025 recipient of the Summer Undergraduate Research Fellowship. Today, I just want to share a little bit about my research and talk about some of the experiences I've had working in the program over the summer. To begin with, the title of my paper was The Notion of Decision in Heidegger and Derrida through Sophocles' Antigone, and it dealt primarily with the idea of decisions as they're written about by two figures in particular, a French philosopher named Jacques Derrida and a German philosopher, Martin Heidegger. I was drawn to the idea of decisions, one, kind of because I'm an indecisive person myself, but more importantly because I think that decisions are so central to how we determine ourselves or define who we are in relationship to the world around us. For instance, our decisions express our priorities and our preferences and our commitments, obligations, friendships, and so on. But at the same time, so much of our decisions aren't up to us to decide. I think of the specific lineages and geographies and political climates that we're born into that we don't necessarily choose, but which still determine what kinds of choices are available to us. I think also of how decisions can get out of hand, how they can hurt others despite our best intentions, or sometimes even hurt ourselves. Heidegger and Derrida are two thinkers who I feel recognize both this sense of vulnerability and also the sense of risk that our decisions carry. And they do so in a way that is novel, or at least is contrary to the way we think often of decisions as a function of our agency, as our power to choose this over that in a given scenario. When we think of decisions like that, we might ask, how should we wield that agency? What is the right choice for me to make in this situation? And these are good questions and necessary questions, but I feel drawn also to the way Heidegger and Derrida approach decisions, not so much as something we do, but as something that determines and decides over us. So we might ask, looking at it that way, how do decisions happen? How do they come to pass? How do we find ourselves transformed as we go through fundamental events in our lives? And how can we be responsive to those events in decision in a way that's responsible? I think Heidegger and Derrida are very much aligned in the way that they pose these questions, but differ significantly in the way they respond to them. Part of what I wanted to do with this project was highlight some of those differences and articulate what's at stake in them. In order to do that, and also to give a level of tangibility and concreteness to the ideas that I'm trying to represent, I do a comparative reading of these different notions of the decision with the Greek tragic play Antigone by the poet Sophocles. In the play, Antigone, who's the daughter of Oedipus, decides to bury her brother Polynices, who's been declared a traitor to the state, basically, against the public orders of the king, Creon, who's also her uncle. I think that the way Antigone captures what is at stake in both Heidegger's and Derrida's idea of the decision is very relevant now, and I think particularly of this constant draw towards productivity and achievement and efficiency in our personal and professional lives. We're not often given the time to stay with or wade in the ambiguity that surrounds important decisions. We're expected instead to push ahead and ignore those aspects of the decision we can't control. For instance, I think of the pressure placed upon college students like myself to have their whole careers mapped out before they even receive their diploma. We're expected to have made connections in our field or received accolades before even entering the workforce. And so I think against this, Heidegger and Derrida both stress, I would call it the delimitation of our decisions, the way that decisions always carry consequences that we can't predict and that are situated in ways that we can't control, and find ways to affirm that condition, affirm that sense of vulnerability and risk that our decisions carry. I'd like to talk a little bit about what it was like actually writing and researching this paper, particularly because I often get questions about what research even looks like in the humanities, given how different it is from the social sciences or the hard sciences where you're collecting empirical data or conducting labs or giving interviews. For me, I'll say it really comes down to just two things, reading and writing, as simple as that sounds. So I'll talk first a little bit about the research, period of my project because I think it was pretty straightforward. I came to my professor, told her what I was interested in writing about, and she gave me recommendations for books and articles she thought might interest me. Then I would meet with her on a weekly basis, bringing specific quotations or passages from those texts that interested me or that I felt required clarification, and we would discuss them. I also did a lot of my own independent research, looking for and gathering sources, and in the process, I think really sharpened my abilities as a researcher and exposed me to a bunch of resources I didn't even know were available to me. For instance, when I had started researching, I got into this rabbit hole of trying to track down a obscure dissertation from the 1980s and couldn't find it anywhere. And eventually that led me to the interlibrary loan system at our university where you can request documents from other institutions. And so I put in a request, not expecting much, and then much to my surprise, 3 days later, I received in my email a copy of the entire dissertation scanned as a PDF. And as silly as it sounds, it kind of felt like magic. I was so happy. And that's a resource that I've used countless times since then. I feel I should also mention that while I was working on this project, I was continuing to develop my own proficiency in French, and so I was able to engage some of these sources in their original language, particularly those of Derrida in French. And one of my proudest moments working on this project was being able to read through an unpublished and untranslated transcript of one of his seminars and finding just the perfect quote for what I wanted to say and being able to cite it and give my own translation and put in the footnote next to the citation, translation's mine, which was a very nice feeling. Which I suppose brings me to the writing period, which structurally was very similar to the research phase. I met with my advisor every other week. I brought a draft of my thesis to her, and she would give me suggested revisions and constructive feedback, and I would address them to show her the next week. The difference being that the writing phase was much, much longer than the reading phase. To give you an idea of what I mean, the completed paper comes out to about 20 pages, excluding bibliography and endnotes. I started working on it at the beginning of spring last year, and I finished working on it 2 weeks ago, and only because I had to, because of deadlines. And so that's 9 months for 20 pages, which, to be clear, is not because I wasn't working on it consistently. I was. It's just that my output was not consistent. There would be weeks where I would soar through a section of the paper without a hitch and require very few revisions, and others where for weeks, sometimes months, I would be caught in an endless cycle of rewrites and drafting the same section over and over again. Days where I could sit at my computer for 6 to 7 hours and be able to muster barely even a sentence. And those periods were very challenging and frustrating, but I'm very glad that I experienced them because I think they taught me a lot, both on the technical academic side of writing and researching, but also on the personal side. You know, I developed tactics for working through writer's block, which counterintuitively enough often meant taking a break. I think when you're so passionate about a project and so dedicated to it, there's this temptation to just keep working on it until it's perfect. But oftentimes, when I took a pause from working, when I went on vacation or hung out with friends or just read things in philosophy that didn't pertain to my thesis, I would come back with a renewed energy and a new perspective. I think also working on this project gave me a sense of confidence in my skills as a writer. We always hear that we're our own worst critics, but I don't think I really learned that until I worked on this project. Being so close to something for so long makes it hard not to see anything but what you perceive to be the mistakes and the errors. Yet often the pieces of writing that I was most self-conscious about and self-critical were those that received the least amount of feedback or criticism and required the least amount of revisions. And so I realize it's a bit dramatic to say, but I feel that working on this project has really transformed me as a person. I'm different than I was a year ago when I started on it. And so I suppose I should give, by way of a conclusion, a couple words of gratitude. First to my advisor and professor, Dr. Daniela Valleganoy, whose endless generosity made this project possible. And also to the people at the Center for Undergraduate Research and Engagement who gave me this opportunity. Being a student in philosophy, it is easy to look at the state of the humanities in academia, the constant slashing of budgets, layoff of faculties, sometimes entire departments being cut, and feel a little bit dejected. But the fact that some people saw my research, saw my ideas, and were interested enough in them to give me funding is sincerely astonishing. And I'm so grateful to them. It gives me a little bit of hope for the future of the humanities.